tell my younger self as far as writing stuff? Because a lot of this stuff is organic. You learn it as you go.
It's strange. It's nothing I ever expected.
I want to tell my stories by eliciting emotion in my audience.
So it's an organic process. They sort of layer on top of each other. Each one makes the next layer more obvious to me.
This whole thing could not have gone any smoother.
I usually say squat only in groups of 3. I like the batches, like squat, squat, squat.
Look, guys, this one's not going to be like normal. It's just not.
Welcome to The Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the mellifluous Kaylin Williams.
That's a big difference. It's like, are you talking or are you doing? What's happening here?
We still have all the pets that think, oh, it's time to eat. It doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m.
My name is Walt, and this is Coffee and Concepts on Keystroke Medium.
Get hyped.
I know, right? I love the intro. I actually made notes on the intro today. I'm like, I got to talk about this. We got to clarify a couple of things here. People watching.
You're being like some kind of like prepared professional podcaster.
When we first started, remember I can't remember where we got it, but it was some sort of podcasting guru person who was like, I can't remember if we talked to him personally or if we had just researched it together, but it was like, you need to take notes like on paper. So you're not typing it and distracting people, and you need so you don't interrupt. But like when you're doing an interview, like
with your clackety clicking keyboard.
Yeah, and so every time I watch that intro, I think it's awesome for one. But two, the only thing it's missing is Peter F. Hamilton's name tag.
I know there was no way for me to like change the overlay,
yeah. And that's such an amazing interview for us. That was fairly early.
Yeah.
He's such a big time name. I just saw a post on him, some book he's working on too, and he was one of the most generous, awesome people, we met up to that point. And we met a lot since then too, but he's a super cool guy and an amazing writer.
We could do the Chuck pin clicks in honor of Chuck. First, Guy Anthony DeMarco, I think, is getting his first KSM golf clap of appreciation. Guy, you had the first comment. Thank you, sir. Thanks for showing up. Bart of Today's here. Welcome. Man, it's been a while since we just jumped on and did a surprise show. Scott and I have been yelling at each other for weeks to hop on here, and finally he pummeled me into submission. So here we are. Welcome to the show. Thanks everybody for tuning in today and not getting any heads up. Here we are. We're just going to kind of talk about some stuff today. We've got a couple ideas that Scott has very professionally written down on his notepad. I don't know if you noticed this or not. Prepared professional podcasters, the 3 Ps. We're the only 2 count. It's true. The 3 Ps. Right. And I just made that up. It's definitely necessary.
We're definitely going to riff on that. I think Ps in general are probably a good thing for most.
Yes. So we're just going to kind of ramble on. Today we're going to do a little update about what we've had going on the last couple of months. And then we've got some ideas to talk about, like beginnings of your book. And then also taking criticism from like beta readers and editors and that kind of thing. We've been both of us have kind of been not struggling with that, but doing some things in that area the last couple of weeks. So it was kind of on our hearts and minds to talk about. Scott, why don't you go ahead with your update first, man? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. I managed to show up.
Yeah.
So my updates are always pretty boring, and I forget that we do updates all the time in kind of one of our little writing support groups, which this obviously is as well, just kind of like the public and live. I mean,
but it's ours.
What could go wrong? So I've been writing it quite a bit. I'd recently finished the Blue Sun Armada series because it's not my primary money earner, just something I've done kind of a passion project, and I didn't market it forever, hardly at all. And So it kind of died on the vine as far as sales go, but I still really enjoy it. And I love the book covers, and I have like 9 or 10 book covers on it. And so when I finished book 4, realizing I just didn't have time for it anymore, I tied it off where it could be done. Although probably if you're a fan of the story, you probably want it to keep going, because they basically just kind of, it ends basically like, okay, and this is what we're going to do going forward to find Earth or whatever. But I kind of want to write some more of it. So I may start working on that again. I think I'm going to do a really good outline of it and do a kind of a complete deep refresh of all my knowledge of the series and where I would like it to go, ideally. And the music next to me is Christopher Parkening's Guitar Method Volume 1. And underneath that's a bass thing. I do a lot of my music lessons online now through Scott's Bass Lessons, because he's got some amazing stuff there. But my son was taking classical guitar last summer, and I went back to that book, and I got us each a copy, so I quit stealing his, and I started to play it for a while, but we'll see. Maybe someday I'll get all the way through it again. One of my many distractions. So
your mic is really loud.
I'm probably too close. How are we right now? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. You got to tell me, and the people in the crowd, just because it's like this much difference makes a huge thing with this.
Scoot it back just a little bit more.
How's
there
that?
You go. That's
better.
much,
okay.
mucho
I'm
better.
gonna start completely over so that I'm not too loud. I think everything.
We'll cut all that out.
I'm going back a little bit further yet because I'm shy. But anyway, so I want to do that as a passion project. One of the reasons I'm interested in it again is I recently did the Brian Cohen Ad Profit Challenge, which is a free thing you can do I think he does it a few times a year. And they started actually selling a little bit again. And I actually started selling my Enemy of Man books, which I haven't even tried to sell for probably 5 years. I mean, I wrote them in like 12 and 13. I think they're published between 13 and 15 or something. And, but I was like, and I really like those stories. And it's nice to see people start picking them up again. I'm like, wow, that's cool. I didn't think that was even possible. So that's very exciting. It's not definitely a game-changing moneymaker or anything like that. But when there's stories you care about and you start getting eyes on them again, that's a good feeling. It goes back to those early days when you're like, holy shit, a stranger read my book and liked it.
Right.
You know, that's your measure of success. And now it's
right.
like you want to pay bills and stuff. So that's that. Probably bigger for me right now is we launched, Jeff Chaney and I launched Homeworld Lost, the first book, earlier this month, and it's doing extraordinarily well. The sales are freaking fantastic, more than I could ever hope for. So that's very nice to have that. And that's largely due to his enormous fan base and his marketing prowess, wizardry, but also I think it's a really good story. I enjoyed writing it. And so I did, my part has always been just get the books written in that particular relationship. And I'm sticking to it. Now that I'm full-time writer, I have to be disciplined and not.
Well, now it sounds like you're underwater.
Not take too many.
There we go.
Not take too many distractions, like playing all this music, because I used to want to be a musician pretty badly as well, and I was very serious about it. So that's about it for me. Writing a lot. I'm also working on an Athon project. You know, I'm always over scheduled because as I've said in other interviews, I set my goals on a good day. I'm like, shit, I wrote 7,000 words. I could do fucking 3 books at a time. Why not?
Right.
You know, and then the next you do that for 2 or 3 days, then you're like, then you hit one of those 500 word days and you're like, the sky is falling. It's over. I'm a failure.
I've had a lot of those days.
But yeah, so, I mean, the thing is that's why I put on there on my thing, process and productivity, because even though I've had not nearly as good a word counts as when I very first retired, I'm still getting a lot done just because it's all about doing a little bit every day and it adds up. So that's good. What else is going on around here? We were kind of moved into the new house. Can't remember how long it's been since we had a show, but that's going pretty well. I mowed the yard for like 5 hours the other day because it finally rained. Be careful what you wish for. Now that it's rained, the grass is like ridiculous. And I have a very simple mower. I should probably get a rider, but that's going.
We need I think we need like a foot more of rain. I can't remember how
Oh,
much
wow.
Cheney is down, but Cheney is down significantly. It's a lake near here. It's a reservoir actually, and it's significantly low. And now that we're like 3 weeks away from lake season, I really needed to just rain a shit ton so we can have some water.
Oh yeah. Well, the boat's going to have to be just a camper, I guess.
Yeah, right.
That's about it for me.
Chuck sent me a message and wanted to hop in the show. I sent him the link. I don't know if he's going to hop in or not. We'll see.
Who, Chuck? All right, I'd love to see Chuck.
I want to get a zero turn. My yard is right on the edge of being pushable and rideable, and it's almost too small for a rideable, but we'll see.
Park the rideable is the problem. I don't know where I would store it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd also like to get a rideable
space in your garage.
I'd like to scare off all the geese. We have a lot of geese that come through here, and I was out there last time. I was like, it's like a homeless camp. I was out there taking craps in my yard. I like these people. These geese poop like grown men. I'm like,
oh, you don't have a fence around your yard, do you?
No.
If you put a fence around your yard, they won't land there. Well, little known fact, and I don't know why it is, but if you have a fence around your yard, especially a wrought iron fence, and probably a wood one too, they won't come in your yard. I don't know what it is, because we didn't have a fence for a really long time at our old house. And then we magically got a fence because both neighbors decided to put one in, and we were like, yes, score, we got a fence for free. And then no more geese landed in our yard.
Yeah.
Anyway, my update is not very long. I've been doing a lot of Athon work, getting caught up. We're kind of ahead on our formatting. We're trying to stay that way. Steve is making his acting debut this week. And I don't want to say too much about that, but that looks pretty cool. And so I'm it, like it's me and Rhett. And so I have all of Steve's job this week. And
Nice.
so I've been slamming out some formats and some quality issue corrections and all that stuff. But then I'm very slowly working on my rewrites for Weaponized 1. I think right now, the book is finished. It's been finished for a long time. I found a plot hole, and now I've been struggling to fix that plot hole, which involved doing a whole bunch of rewriting on one of the secondary plot lines. And a lot of it was that I realized in the middle of the second book, I realized that this whole plot thread was backwards. And what happens at the end of the plot thread originally should have happened at the beginning, and what happened at the beginning should have happened at the end. So I had to rewrite a lot of that stuff, and that took a lot of time. And there's been a lot going on, man. I just feel like I run out of time almost every day without being able to do anything.
It's weird how fast the time goes when you supposedly have more of it.
Yeah, I managed to turn in a short story to Tom Kratman, who's doing a Terra Nova anthology for Bane. And it is my first EOD POV short story that I've written. Well, first EOD or Bomb Squad character that I've written as a main character. I've had, breachers and stuff like that before in some of my books, but this is the first time I wrote from the perspective of a bomb tech. And it was really interesting. It was fun. I was about 8,000 words into the story and realized that it was going to be longer than 10. And so I had to scramble to find the email, and I found the email, and it was like, the word limit was 15,000. I'm like, yes, I'm going to be under. For the love of God, I'm going to be under. And I think I ended up at like 11,000 words or something like that. I spent like an hour on the phone with one of my friends who used to be the bomb squad commander here for Wichita. And we spent about an hour building the bomb, and then an hour talking about deconstructing the bomb. And then we spent 15 minutes making sure the ATF and the FBI understood that it was only for fictional purposes only. And it wasn't, strictly speaking, not that we were putting together a for real bomb. And so that was fun. And then been doing a lot of reading. I'm not on track for the book a week like I was doing last year rather. But I have read several books this year, a couple of indie books, some trad pub books. I'm in the middle of reading Steve Bolyer's Black Talon series with Andy Peliquin. And it's really, really, really good. I just finished Tower of Silence by Larry Correia, which is also good. Reading a lot of thrillers this year, again, like I did last year. And I was on like a kind of a lull in my reading there for a little while. But Chuck's here.
I see how it is.
Hey, Chuck.
I see how it is.
He's the eternal intern. You never ride. Pets' heads are
let me know you're doing a damn show.
Hey, we didn't even know we were doing a show.
No. I thought we were tighter than that, man.
Everybody, welcome Chuck the intern. welcome to the show.
Hi guys, been a minute.
Yeah, surprise. This was kind of an impromptu thing. We decided, hey, let's do a show and see if we can't do them more often than not. Because the happens to be the more often.
That is the truth. I was actually toying with the idea of jumping on here by myself just because I miss doing this.
Yeah.
So, you guys must have read my mind from Kansas.
That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
It really is, but I'm not sure for who.
Aliens have connected us all neurologically.
But anyway, Josh, I didn't mean to interrupt your update, man. What were you saying? You read a lot of thrillers.
I read a whole bunch of thrillers, read a whole bunch of books. I don't have a favorite yet so far. Some of the books I read this year kind of like I read Brad Thor's first book, The Lions of Lucerne, which was written like 20 years ago, and you can tell that it was written 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And but it was still good. Like it was still a well-told story, but you could definitely tell the writing style has kind of morphed over time.
Yeah, I remember that one. It was a good book.
Yeah. So I'm reading Black Talon. I'm listening to Black Talon right now. I'm actually reading Best Served Cold, Joe Abercrombie. It's a standalone, I believe. It's a standalone in the universe of his first law books. And Scott and I actually,
we had a fight. We had a wrestling match.
We had a mud wrestling argument about this because I looked up. So I wanted to read them in order. I've already read the first trilogy, which I was
your recommendation.
It was the first trilogy. It was really hard for me to say anything about because I loved the characters, but the plot I felt was not there. There was like really no story to me. And I didn't feel like a holy crap moment at the end of the third book where you get like closure and circle and, all of this stuff. But the characters are fantastic, especially Glokta. He was my favorite.
Glokta was amazing.
Oh, he was a great character.
Yeah.
I
think that trilogy it was carried on the backs of the characters.
100%.
You're right.
Yeah.
There was no overarching story to that thing. It's just each individual character had their own little, this is what my life is like kind of thing.
I felt like the story was kind of background.
It really was. And,
it was
honestly,
more on
it was
theme
Baez.
Theme and plot. Yeah.
Yeah. Baez was like the background, the old wizard guy. He was kind of like, it was like he would almost start a big arc and then he would just chop it off.
Yep.
And so I kept wondering where he was going with that, but overall an enjoyable read just for the characters. Glokta alone.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm reading Best Served Cold because I found on a website the chronological reading order for the books. And Scott, I think, was telling me that he read A Little Hatred and that trilogy there. But the standalones in the story timeline actually come before A Little Hatred.
When I was at the bookstore, and I don't usually buy this a while back now, I bought the paperback and I just opened it up and I went by what it said in the book jacket because I'd been confused about it before. I had looked online and which comes next, but the book jacket, at least the one I looked at, it said that Little Hatred was the fourth one to read, and so that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then I harassed Josh into reading them again, and then now we're reading different books we can't talk about anyways. So
it's all screwed up. So anyway, that's me. That's my update. And
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, No, what were we gonna say?
I was just say there's some character transformation in the last 3 books that is fairly exceptional, and that's why I was harassing you to read them. But anyways,
no, that's it. Chuck, why don't you give a little update, man, and then we'll kind of talk about what we're going to talk about.
I have been still plugging away at the writing, working on that last Jack Dark book, and talking some other stuff with Athon. I've switched over to Dabble for my writing software because it's pretty awesome, and I can actually sit at work in the break room with my phone during my break and get words in, which is kind of amazing. And if I don't mind people hearing me talk, I can just dictate into my phone, and it does a pretty good job of getting them in there good. So I really like that software. I've been reading a lot of mystery thriller type stuff lately because I've got an idea for a PI series that I want to write eventually. But I've listened to or read all of the Will Trent books after I saw some episodes of the TV show. A couple of Jack Reacher novels, some Orphan X.
Orphan X is so good.
Orphan X is really good. I've currently got Burner, one of the Gray Man books. In my earbuds. I heard that one's pretty good.
Have you read any of the other ones?
Yeah, I read the first 2, I think. And
of the Gray Man?
Yeah, and then I just kind of jumped ahead to this one because it was available immediately and I needed something to listen to. What else? Things are calming down with the family, so I'm getting more time to get these words in and get my writing thing back on track. I think I've decided to go with some pen names, actually. I was talking with Steve about how having one name covering various genres doesn't really work in my favor to the Amazon algorithms.
Indeed.
So I'm thinking about adopting Stephen Brooks for my science fiction. And then when I get around to writing the mystery thriller, I'm just going to go with Chuck Manley on those because that just kind of sounds mystery thriller-ish. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's too on the nose. But yeah, that's pretty much been it. Just trying to get back on track with the writing job and working at the other job and taking care of the fam. My son's about to graduate. My son will graduate next week.
Awesome.
So he's all pumped up for that, and he's getting ready to head off to college. He got into one of his first choices, Montevallo, about 2 hours from here. And yeah, so that's really cool. That's all we're doing.
Very nice. You mentioned Dabble. I wholeheartedly recommend the Dabble software. I use it all the time. I put a link in the live chat. I've been doing some streams over with Hank on the Storycraft Cafe.
Yeah, I've been listening to those, actually.
The company that does Dabble. And I'm actually doing some a plotting masterclass. It's their version of masterclass. And I'm doing a kind of a plotting series for them. I got my first video done last week, and I'm going to be working on another one hopefully this week. But that'll be I guess there's going to be a cluster of series that they're going to, once all of mine are done and a whole bunch of other, they're going to put them out and sell them. I don't know when or how or what, but it was kind of cool to be invited to do that. But anyway, one of the things we want to talk about today were beginnings, because we've read a couple of books. I've read a couple of books here recently that really had some rocky beginnings, and kind of some I say simple things, simple fixes to make your openings better, but in every stage of an author's journey is different. So when I say simple, it's relative. One of the big things I have seen in beginnings recently is a whole bunch of information being thrown at you, and not really like walls of exposition, but very cleverly broken up, but it's all unnecessary information. For instance, if you're having a fight scene as you're beginning, you don't need to explain where the bad guy came from. You don't need to, if it's a science thing, you don't need to explain the tech he's using, unless that tech really, really, really affects what's going on in the scene. My my golden rule for any, especially for a first chapter and a first book of a series, is as simple as you can make it.
Mm-hmm.
As simple as you can make it, and as lean as you can make it. You can have a sweeping space opera epic story, like we mentioned Peter F. Hamilton earlier, that, and you know, he has a cast of hundreds, but you need to start your book with one, and or two, but ideally one, and make that opening about the character. It's gotta grip the reader, because if the reader doesn't care about what the character is, who the character is, and what they're doing, all the other cool stuff you're not going to do. So I've read a couple of books now where there's 5, 6, 7 things going on in the opening. You've got the introduction of the character, the introduction to the war, the introduction to technology, the introduction to all of this, and then you have
their interesting backstory that is
right.
Yeah.
One of the most recent books I've read, and this is not a plug for Steve's book, I'm reading it, so this is the example that I'm using. In Black Talon, he has an opening chapter where it's the main character kind of walking through this dingy, dreary market, and he's getting ready to assassinate someone. And the picture that Steve painted in his writing is phenomenal. And it was extremely simple, and it really, not only did it draw me into what the character was doing with the assassination part of the chapter, but also the imagery that Steve painted with the surroundings and the people around him without dragging it into explanation or whatever. I think, and Scott and I talked about this in the post show, one of the most horrible things you can do is do a beginning like The Way of Kings from Brandon Sanderson. And Brandon Sanderson is a phenomenal actor. Take a shot. We talk about him here on the show all the time. But The Way of Kings opening only works because Brandon Sanderson has gained the trust of his audience. And so he can basically do whatever he wants, because his audience knows he's going to be able to pull this off. And I love The Way of Kings. I love the Storm of the Archives.
It took me several tries spaced over about a year to read that series, and I loved it that book once I read it. But every time I tried to start it, the couple of first chapters and prologues and confusion and unclarity, and I was just like, I really struggled to get into it. And I only did it because everybody I knew was telling me it was the greatest thing ever. If I hadn't had all that peer pressure, I would have bailed.
For sure. I mean, it took me 3 times to get through it. And finally on the third time.
I keep saying I'm going to try Sanderson again, but after Elantris, I'm still kind of gun shy.
Man, Elantris is the weakest link, buddy. It's the
I know,
weakest
you told me that. You've told me that numerous times. I just haven't made it there
yet. Start with Mistborn. Don't go to the Way of Kings. Start with Mistborn. Read Mistborn.
What's the first book of Mistborn?
The Final Empire.
The Final Empire.
Mistborn.
Okay.
Yeah. The Final Empire is awesome.
So we're talking too, as we got started, is like maybe we start out by defining what a beginning is for and what it's supposed to do. The most concise, I can't remember where I read it or who said it first, but it's probably said by more than one person because it's fairly obvious. But your only job in the opening, in the first page, the first paragraph, the first sentence, is to make people read the next sentence.
Right.
Indeed.
And a lot of people do that. They think, well, I need to have this really exciting hook. And so they basically write a Marvel action sequence because visually on the screen with special effects, it's exciting, but it's not the most powerful way. I think the first thing you got to do is hook the reader that your character matters and is worth following, and ask a question that demands to be answered. Like, what is happening to this person?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's all about the question. You know, I think the openings are basically to say, this is who we're talking about, whatever character you choose to follow. And this is what they're trying to figure out. You know, you gotta, and I'm a fan of doing it in media res. You know, there's something happening to grab the reader's attention, and they want to know who it's happening to, why they're doing it. And you present those questions to get them to go to the next page, the next chapter, whatever.
The first sentence in Black Talon Josh just talked about is 2 men would die today.
Yeah. See, that's a great opening. That's a fantastic opening, because they're going to go, well, who's going to die? Why are they going to die? and that's going to grab the reader's attention.
And it becomes even more interesting because then the assassin talks about how he's only going there to kill one dude. And so now you're like, okay, who's the second guy?
Hold on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
See, so, that's what I'm saying. Questions, man.
Right.
Readers respond to those.
It's interesting to me that, especially with sci-fi, and Steve and I have talked about this a lot, and with Weaponized, I'm doing kind of a sci-fi Mission Impossible thriller, right? It's sci-fi, but it's not military sci-fi like I've written before. It's more of a Mission Impossible setting. I hesitate to say James Bond because it's not one guy, but it's that type of thriller. And guitars.
Yeah, that's my phone going off. Sorry about that. I meant to read it.
And so one of the things I've been doing is, like we said earlier, reading a lot of thrillers and really trying to take the thriller, how a thriller is written, and write that in this book, because the sci-fi genre is typically written differently than a lot of like modern action thrillers.
Well, both Jonathan Marbury and Larry Correia are kind of taking that same approach with fantasy.
Yeah,
with Kagan the Damned and the one you were talking about. I can't remember.
The Brotherhood of the Forgotten.
Whatever that series is called. But they're kind of taking that thriller structure and slapping it onto a fantasy novel. And from what I've read so far, it works really well.
I haven't read any of Jonathan Mayberry. I've read the Larry Correia books. I just finished the fourth one. And you're right. They are. It's more of a fast-paced. Definitely not epic fantasy. Like, it's fantasy.
It's more thrilling.
It's
what I did there?
A fast-paced fantasy, which is fine. Like, it's different from a lot of the genre. It almost puts me off because I want an epic fantasy, and that's why I like Black Talon. It's a lot slower. I don't necessarily need Game of Thrones slow.
Glacial.
But some like a medium kind of in the middle area. So I mean, because beginnings, like, I've read several books that I just tossed, like the third Jack Carr novel, In the Blood. That book starts out with a girl basically getting eaten by a pack of dogs. And I was immediately put off because it was kind of gross. But also I didn't care about her. Like, the only reason I cared about her was because it was gruesome that she was getting chased by these dogs. And I was like, well, that sucks. But I don't know anything about her. And normally in that kind of a setting, you're like, okay, we want to set up why you need to know, why you want to understand who this girl is. I didn't feel that at all. I was like,
they needed to pepper some how she got herself into this situation.
Well, and I like, not necessarily that, but at least in my mind, like, give me some question to go through to push me through to the next chapters, and it wasn't there.
So the other thing about that too is, so there's no question there, because you're like, this person is getting horribly savage. It's gratuitous violence, but there's no like, maybe you could get away. I mean, if there was like hope the character could get away, or if there was the dread of having it happen, where it's like, this is happening, nothing you can do about it.
Yeah,
and that's a motivation killer for me.
Right.
That actually brings up another question, I think, is that can you guys have mentioned, I haven't read this, but you guys have mentioned a couple of times that it was just like gratuitously gross. And, how gratuitous in the action and the gore and whatnot.
You're narrowing your audience significantly, because some people, that's all they like. Like, I really liked The Boys. I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes when I stumbled across it, and for various reasons, but I just haven't really gone back to it because it's so gross most of the time.
It gets worse.
That I really need more than just a big splash of gore on the front page.
Yeah.
I mean, that show, it was interesting because it was so surprising from a hero movie. I don't know if people have watched it; they'll know the scene I'm talking about. When you're like, "Oh shit, this is not what I thought it was."
No,
right. But now it's just like they're like trying to outgross themselves, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm kind of done."
Well, they did an episode in the most recent season that they will never outgross.
Fantastic.
Well, yeah,
I don't have any desire to watch The Boys.
No, it takes a lot to turn me off. I got a pretty strong stomach.
Worse than the dildo fight assassination scenes.
Yes, much worse.
Okay,
it was probably disturbingly bad. And I probably won't watch if they do another season. I probably won't watch it just because I don't want to see them try to top that. But
well, that's the thing. Like you talk about, like what are your audience expectations?
Right. Where's the line?
You can take it too far.
Yeah. Well, can you use that first chapter to say, "Hey guys, this is what's coming. Are you on board?"
Right.
And you should set some expectations. Like, for example, this is a sci-fi book. This is a fantasy book.
Right.
This book is extremely violent. This book contains profanity.
Yeah. Right.
You know, this is kind of something we don't talk about that much. It's not that important, but I do think if you're going to have, like, you're writing a Space Marine book and they're going to swear, you might want to have just a tiny bit somewhere in the first chapter at least, so that you don't get these people, because people that don't want to hear any profanity, if you get halfway through the book and all of a sudden they're dropping F-bombs every place, they're gonna trash your reviews.
Well, on that note, I meant to say I listened to the first 4 books of Drop Trooper.
I'm listening to that right now.
Partlow, and he did an amazing job with
it's
those
really
4
good.
books.
I'm impressed.
But I was going to say that I think he handled the profanity thing. I probably would have put a lot more profanity in those books because Marines.
Yeah.
But he handled that very, very well, to the point where the profanity seems natural. You know, I think he knocked it out of the park with that. I just wanted to give props to Rick Partlow for that, because military sci-fi is not my thing, but I thoroughly enjoyed those books.
Kit mentioned Game of Thrones in the live chat, the Red Wedding, and I think for me the difference between, and I've read the event and watched
Profanity of Valor.
Yeah, Profanity of Valor. Weaponized Profanity of Valor. I think the difference is in relation to what I'm talking about now with Jack Carr's book In the Blood is, well, and Jack Carr's books in general. I think that there's a kind of a, not a line, but kind of a level where you can take it where it does what you're wanting the violence to do, but then you go over that, and it's like seeing, if you're watching, I don't know, if you're watching a video game or a movie and someone gets shot in the face, you're watching it and you're like, okay, I get it. If you see that exact same thing in real life, you're going to have a much bigger reaction and feel to it. Yeah. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying in the books you're not going to think it's real life, but there's a line where this is what happened, and the reader understands, okay, this is what happened. And then also, I'm trying to gross you out, so keep reading this. And I think you can have the effect of having the reader witness someone die rather than just push their face in the bloody corpse and make them smell it. And, for instance, Joe Abercrombie's books, they're very, I wouldn't call them graphic, but they're very visceral. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that happen in those. They're not for everyone. But they're visceral, but not gratuitously graphic, if that makes sense. Like I just read a scene where this chick was beating the crap out of this dude's hand with a hammer, and I'm like, God, man. But it wasn't on the level where I was grossed out by it. And finding that level is really delicate.
Yeah, there's a difference between saying she used the knife to cut off the tip of his finger and he screamed, and then describing it all.
Right.
You know, and I think that's where the line is. The more you try to force the reality of what you're seeing as you in your head into the reader's head, that's where the graphicness comes, because you're not giving them any other choice but to see the spurting blood and the gore and the yada yada yada.
Right.
With Joe Abercrombie's books, the reason they're not for everyone, in my opinion, besides there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of off-scene violence and sex and things like that. One, sex is a very interesting thing in fantasy. It's not usually something that epic fantasy shows or even exists in their world in a lot of epic fantasy. But it's what makes them hard is that the characters do things that you wish they wouldn't.
Oh yeah,
and they will make the wrong decision, and you're like, man, I was just starting to like that character.
There aren't any good guys, really.
Now, there's a kind of good guy in those last 3 books that Josh will never get to because you got to read the other 6 out of 6 books. But he was my least favorite character. A couple of characters were my least favorite characters in those books, but were absolutely my favorite by the end, which is the same with Brandon Sanderson. I can't remember the character, but there was a character in all the drawings in The Way of Kings. I can't remember her name, but I was so not interested in her story in the beginning, but by the end, she was basically the reason I was reading the book.
Yeah, I think the closest thing to a good guy in the first trilogy is the Navigator. And he's not really so much a good guy as he gets sucked into all their crazy and really doesn't have a lot of choice about participating and ends up paying the price for it.
Yeah.
So that being the case, I think
back to beginnings.
Like when you're looking at your beginnings, I think 2 things. Well, 3 questions. Keep it simple. Definitely keep it as simple as you can make it.
Yes.
Make it about 1 or 2, the smallest amount of characters that you can make it about, and then really make the reader engaged in wanting to know more about either A, who the character is, or what the character wants. You don't need to answer what the character wants in the first paragraph.
You should never answer anything,
the first chapter, but you definitely need to set that up. And if it's a sweeping space opera, it's going to be a really long book. You have time to introduce these characters. Don't get caught up in going, I'm going to have 100 characters in this book. I need to introduce them all at once. You don't need to do that. One of the biggest things I don't like about books that have a lot of characters is authors that write 400 or 500 word segments for each character, and then we're jumping between those characters as they're doing something, and I never feel like I get to know those characters. Whereas in, like, say, Game of Thrones, where you're following a character for 5,000 words at a shot, you really get to know who those characters are because you see them engaging in different ways. So that's why when I write multiple characters, especially if I'm doing it at the beginning. Now, at the end of the book, it's different because then you're splicing a whole bunch of things together. But the beginning of the book, when you're doing introductions or going on their character journey, I try to keep an average of 2,000 words a chapter. Sometimes it's 2,500. But I purposely aim for that length so that I don't undercut the character's contribution to the story or the reader's desire to get to know that character. Because I like all the characters, but the character the reader might like one more than the other. And so I
usually have a favorite.
Right. And so I want to be able to present each character equally while not slowing down the book, obviously, but that's a whole completely different thing. But if you have a lot of characters, let them go into second chapter, third chapter, fourth chapter. You have a lot of time to introduce those characters, but definitely you need to keep it simple.
To keep doing your 5 points, but see if you can work in Bard's question. He's got a question in there.
How do you feel about prologues and what they should present as opposed to the first chapter? Prologues, like, a lot of people don't like prologues. I like
prologues.
I have no problem with prologues. The problem is, like, do you need the prologue?
And why can't it just be chapter 1?
Or why can't it just be chapter 1?
Sometimes it can just be chapter 1. Sometimes it happened 500 years in the past or something.
Right.
If it's properly used, I think prologues are super good. I mean,
and it's genre specific too.
If you're using the prologue as, if chapter 1 does not have a hook, if that's what you're using the prologue for, the prologue should be chapter 1. The prologue shouldn't be the hook. The prologue should be something that hits you later on in the book, and you're like, "Holy crap, this is interesting. This bringing me full circle back to the prologue."
The question in the comments is that Papa Chuck's a little blurry. When you backed away from the camera, it didn't refocus.
Yeah. Wave at it. Curse at it.
Damn you.
Just pretend he's in a witness relocation
That's it.
thing, and we're blurring
I
him
need
out.
one of those voice modulators.
Yeah.
I wonder if I just kick him out of the show. Oh, there we go. Now he's not blurry.
He's not blurry at all.
Yeah.
So-
He's not even there.
That's so
This he's flipping us off in the green room.
Nice.
Now we'll bring it back. Hey, look, it fixed it.
Hey, I just had to flip it off.
Hey, what's up, Lou? Thought we could do a live show without well, we didn't tell anybody. It was a secret. It was a secret, but welcome to the
We
show.
barely told each other. We just kind of accidentally showed up like random people meeting on the street. Hey, let's do a show.
I think, we could probably talk about beginnings forever, but we want to talk about feedback, and giving and receiving feedback, which I think is an interesting thing. We talked about this in our writers group a little bit this week. And one of the things that's really hard for some writers is feedback, and even from editors and beta readers when you're going through and trying to decide, is this necessary feedback or not? And we're kind of jumping over topics in this episode, and that's okay. We're just kind of rambling, and that's normally what we're known for. But for me,
this is a surprisingly topic-based show.
Yeah, it really is. And you have the notes. I don't even have the notes. I'm going off your notes that I can't see.
We did some beginnings. We're going to talk. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're right here, right where we need to be. Let's
Yeah.
talk,
See,
I'm taking feedback. And
professional, productive podcasting. I think with feedback, first of all, you've got to know who you're getting feedback from. If it's just some random jackwagon that's saying, I didn't like the cursing in your book, that's not feedback. That's just feelings. And you can just throw that out the window. Does it have anything to do with your writing? If you're getting feedback about, I don't understand the motivation for this character. Okay. Look at that.
Especially if you're getting the same or similar feedback from multiple people.
Multiple people.
Right.
Yeah.
You get
Then
one
you need
person.
Yeah, go ahead,
that's an
Scott.
opinion. If you get one
Yeah,
person, that's an opinion. No, keep going.
Because like I don't do a whole lot of beta readers. I do some, and then normally the stuff that I get back is his eyes were green and you said they were blue or something like that. Like that's not really feedback. That's just pointing out a fact. And the same thing with editing.
I got things like so put some in context where I came up with this question is for my Cheney books, there's 2 editors and about 20 beta readers. And I got to make sure I address everything they say, and they're really good, but they're very different. And like one of the things is one of the characters in Homeworld Lost is this warrior character, and he has a symbiotic battle tail that he was
I love that idea.
He comes up, and it's like in the early book, it's funny. He's like, your tail's looking at me because it's just a spike, but it's like, I think that thing's how's it looking at me? It doesn't have any eyes. This really creeped me out. But anyway, the battle tail that has a name, its name is Ufri. They both get severely injured, and he gets removed from his body. And I'm writing along in book 3 or book 2. I'm like cruising along. And I go to read the beta readers. It's like, I thought they took that off during the surgery, and it's still on the ship because they're on a planet. And I'm like, well, fuck. So that took some reworking to figure out what I was going to do, whether it was going to stay off or I had to write scenes to put it back on. So things like that are really useful. Typo is really useful. A lot of the people in the beta group are smarter than me, so they'll find out science things or how I'm incorrectly using words. Like that word doesn't mean what you think it means. It's surprisingly frequent with me, even though I'm
you keep using that word.
Yeah, you keep using that.
It doesn't know what I think it means.
But I'm also a pleaser psychologically, and so I feel the need to literally address every single comment to every single person's satisfaction, and it makes me miserable. And then I angry text or call and yell at Josh because I'm so frustrated trying to make all the changes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to learn where the line is where this is making me a better writer in general and improving the manuscript. And while I wrote the fucking book, I guess I can decide if this is the way it needs to be.
Well, that's the thing. I used to struggle with feedback, editorial feedback. And if you get a good editor is not going to try to rewrite your book, but they're going to point out the things that you could do better. I think one of the interesting things that I've learned more about editing and my writing is using Pro Writing Aid before I send it to the editor.
Yeah. Always
because
the cleanest thing you can.
Yes,
Pro Writing
absolutely.
Aid finds so much stuff about my writing, and it's funny. Like every time I use it, I'm like, I knew that from the last time I used it. Why didn't I change it up this last time?
Yeah.
And I saved myself the problem, like passive and all that
Like
stuff.
those little things you know you do, and you think, okay, I got to handle it, because you catch you'll catch yourself doing it a couple of times in a manuscript. You're like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I got this, and then that damn Pro Writing Aid will be like, no, you don't.
Every
Yeah,
now and then
exactly.
I'll do a pro writing run through something specifically as a learning experiment where I'm like, okay, I'm literally going to, because a lot of times when you're doing pro writing aid, you're dealing with a lot of feedback. You got to make lots of corrections. You don't have time to spend an hour fixing one page and making it perfect. You got another 400 pages to get done. So you got to
Right.
make choices and move. But sometimes I'll do like, I'm going to do it for 30 minutes. I'm going to sit there and just like really dig into these grammatical type suggestions in the passive voice and you know, and see what I can learn from it. But circling back around to how to deal with people, beta readers, editors, kind of what you should be getting. Part of it is how do you get a bunch of beta readers? I don't really have an answer for that right now. I don't know if you guys have any suggestion. And what's a good beta reader? What should you be looking for in a beta reader?
Well, that's the thing. Before you start looking for a beta reader, you need to understand what you want and what you need out of the beta reader. For me, I know that I need help with spelling and punctuation and wrong words. Like that, for me, that is the number one thing I need a beta reader for. Normally, I have story and character and plot tied up. There might be some places where a character's like, I don't understand that, or a person's like, I don't understand that. But for the most part, I've got that wrapped really good. But I am slightly dyslexic, and so when I read through proofs, I miss a crap ton of words. And no matter how clean the story is in the draft, the prose is typically crazy. Like I need help, and so if I send it out to people to read for early readers, the only thing I'm really looking for is major plot holes that they're like, this can't be fixed, or spelling. And that's what I look for specifically in mine.
I don't typically want like an editorial reading. I want, anytime I give something to a beta reader, which I don't do very frequently anymore, but I typically just want them to treat it as a book they just picked up off the shelf. And then and they just read it as a normal consumer would. And if they find a problem with it, if they say, I didn't like this, and they can tell me why, then I'll address that, because you know that's the ultimate goal. That's who we're trying to please, is just
For sure.
your average everyday guy that just wants to. Who was it? It was Heinlein who said that he always considered himself to be competing with a 6-pack of beer. He said he wanted a guy to get off work on Friday and go to the store and either get his $5 paperback off the rack or get that 6-pack of beer.
Yeah.
And that's how he can, and that's who we're trying to please. So when I have beta readers, I want them to read like one of those people, just an average person with no editorial slant one way or the other,
I think that probably the thing you don't want to do when you're looking for beta readers or for feedback is that unless you really trust the person, don't have an author read it, or someone who's aspiring to be an author.
Authors are often the worst beta readers.
No, you want readers to be the readers.
Right. Like for instance, Chuck had me read his book, and I knew that I was reading his book for a specific reason. And so I made it a point not to rewrite his book. Even though there were scenes that I would have written differently, that didn't mean they were bad. It just meant that I would have written them differently. But
Right.
I knew that he's not looking for that. This is how he writes. Great. And let me just say, I can't even remember the title of the book now. The first Jack, Dark Devices.
Dark Devices, yeah,
It's a great book.
Great book, fantastic book. The narrative, the narrative, the perspective, character is fantastic. It's great. But when I read a book, I'm very cautious about it, especially if it's someone that I know, because I'm going to give feedback on it. I feel like if you read my book and you don't give me feedback on it, and you say, hey, I had an issue with this, but you don't tell me, I would like to know. So if an author asks me to read their book, I'm going to give them feedback, constructive or otherwise. And Chuck, I gave you feedback.
You
and
you said I needed to quit having people meet at restaurants.
Yeah, that's a lot of eating.
Well, that's the way it works down here in the South, man. Food. You know, we're not there.
But I'm very cautious about reading, authors' books, especially really, I hate to say rookie because I don't mean to use that word derogatorily, but beginning authors that are looking for feedback, because typically your first book is not going to be good anyway. And so all the feedback I have would be like, you need to write another book, which is the same thing that I like. And I know we've got a hard break here at like noon because Scott's got to go. But one of the things that I say to a lot of people that are aspiring to write or that are just coming into this thing, that are asking, hey, should I do this? And I'm like, yes, you should do it, but you should write 10 books before, or spend 5 or 6 years learning how to write a good book, because your first book's not going to be good. And if you go off feedback from that first book and they're like, hey, this is bad, it's going to be disappointing, it's going to be demoralizing, but it's also necessary for you to become a better author.
You can't love your, like, what is I think it's Stephen King, but probably somebody else made up the term, kill your darlings when you're doing that.
Yeah, that was Stephen King.
Yeah,
and
so
the bottom line is, if you're going to write, you better be ready for this stuff, because sometimes you're going to get it whether you ask for it or not.
One of my good friends who is in this, I'll be quick. He got his master's of fine arts in ceramics, like doing pottery and things like that. And in one of his higher level courses, he goes in there and he's pretty damn good. And the first thing that their professor had them do, they made this amazing first piece of the class. And then as soon as it came out of the kiln and was ready to look at it, they gave him all a hammer, says, all right, smash that shit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's his exact quote, but the point is that you can't be too attached to that.
That's it.
Or like if you look at an artist who draws and paints, their initial stuff, they're like a sketch. There's a reason it's called sketching. They're fast and sloppy and wild and passionate and things. But if you get locked into this one book you're going to write, it's the only book you're ever going to write, it's going to be much harder. You got to be able to.
You got to know when to let it go.
Mia Cleve in the comments says, if you're an author or editor and a friend asks you to beta read their book, ask what level of feedback they're looking for. Do they want your opinion as a reader or as an author and an editor? And it's a very good point. And I think Guy said that also, ask what they're looking for, because they may be looking for something that you're not giving them. Like, I
want you to tell me it's magnificent, no matter what you really think.
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest, a lot of people, that's exactly what they want. And you're probably going to lose a friendship if you do give them anything other than that. So that's why you should be careful.
Yep. And KJ Fleller says, critiques are priceless because all reviewers will be rough if you don't get the feedback. That's true.
Yep.
If you don't get feedback from your book before you launch it, you're definitely going to get it after.
Yeah.
And those guys on Amazon don't give a crap about your feelings. That's 100%.
Goodreads, baby. If you want to bleed, read some Goodreads reviews.
And Goodreads reviews are now included on the Amazon page. It gives you a review, and then next to it gives you your Goodreads review.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's so much fun.
And let me just say, I've got brutal reviews. So I have got reviews that people hate.
Was you the
my
one
stuff.
that just said nope?
I had one that said nope.
You said one that just said nope. That's still my favorite, I think.
I had one that recently said they basically didn't like the premise and said, well, I didn't read it beyond this. So you basically read the book description.
So you read the book description.
Gave me a review. I'm like, can you just leave a review? Be a chance.
I think the only time that works is if you watch a commercial from like a sci-fi C movie and you're like, I am not watching that horrible movie at all.
Well, and if you don't want it, if the book description turns you off, then just read something else. You don't have to take the time to leave a review.
Leave a review, exactly.
Yeah, and stop sending nude selfies, Leo. It's not okay.
It's not cool, man.
Everybody, we're going to take a hard break here at noon. Scott's got somewhere he's got to be. Hopefully, we're going to be doing this more. Scott and I and Chuck will be joining when
they let me know about it.
The specific, we didn't even know.
Well,
we do need to decide on a time. So if people have feedback they want to put in the comments.
Yeah, let us know on our Facebook group if you got a good time we want to do, and we'll try to work out a better time. But thank you all for coming and hanging out with us today on this impromptu surprise episode of Keystroke Medium. Hopefully, we'll be back next week, and we'll be talking about some reading and some writing and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Peace.
Laters.